sunset. Oh man, hey everyone. Sorry, not sorry for being gone for the past 4 days. Life be lifing. I hope that you're having a great day so far. But also to be fully transparent, I was on my menstrual cycle. And I just want to let you all know that masculine center folks still have their cycle. I don't know who told what that we don't, or we don't talk about it, or whatever the case. And unfortunately, I don't think women talk about it enough, let alone masculine center folks talk about it enough. And so in the practice of being here and listening to my body and taking it slow, that's what I did. Took it slow, took care of myself, ate lots of chocolate, thank goodness for Halloween candy. But let's be honest, that'll probably be the last of that for a very long time. Speaking of masculine center folks, I want to be fully transparent with all of you. That is a big mission on my heart, is to be the person I always needed when I was younger. And so as I am out there helping coaches, helping student leaders, helping just leaders in general, a big part of me and a big part of the work I'll be doing in my life is just creating space and platform and leadership opportunities and mentorship opportunities for masculine center folks, particularly young masculine center folks, because I wish I had that, and I wish that there was just more spaces for us to have these kinds of conversations, because I know that life will be lifing, and there's things in being in a body like this that my family's not having a conversation with me about. So I want to be there for my younger self. And so again, if there's someone that you know that is coachable, is eager, that has similar identities, and you're just like, I don't know how to relate to them, or whatever the case, I want to make it a point for myself to be a mentor to a young person in 2025. So if you think that there's someone who's a good fit and you tell them to check out my Instagram and you think that's a good fit, I want to be of service in that way. So I just wanted to give you all a little update as to where I'm at with all that. But I'm happy to be back. Today is a new day. And so today I have been really reflecting on miracles. This morning I woke up early. The Lord woke me up and said, look, you need to wake up. We got things to do. So much so that I was getting a download this morning, which is such a beautiful time, like in between states of like sleep and about to wake up. And I don't know what beta, alpha, theta wave, delta wave we're in. I'm still studying the brain. That has become a new interest in the time I haven't been here with y'all. And so much so I recorded a voice note that was like 20 minutes long. So today has been such a great day thus far. And again, reflecting on the idea of miracles. And so speaking of growing up, and not having the guidance and wishing that I had someone who looked like me older to be a role model, the best role model that I had and the closest person that has my whole heart is my mom. And so as her youngest child and was practically raised as an only child, I witnessed her around my age, she's older. She had me when she was like 37, 36. Okay, so I'm not there yet. But I witnessed my mother's experience as an immigrant and also as an entrepreneur, and as the curious kid that I am, over the years, I try to gather her story. I'm not sure about you, and if you come from an immigrant family, some families love telling stories. Some families don't. And I so happen to have a family that didn't. But thankfully I was curious. And so I would ask questions and try to put the pieces together. And depending on the day, she would share a little or she would share a lot. And so I would just fill in the gaps with my own imagination and unfortunately my own narratives, perspectives, and lenses. So one of those stories that I ended up developing a whole narrative around was that I was a mistake. Because I wasn't planned, my youngest sister to me is 15 years older than me. The rest of my half siblings are 30 years older than me. And so a lot of the way that my mom would deliver how I was delivered was that I was a mistake. Like I wasn't planned. And I say this, I was like, she didn't want to have any more babies, at 36 years old, she already had 2 kids. My dad already had 5 or 6 kids. Like, why would they want to start all over again? And so that narrative that I'm a mistake has played such a big role in my personality, in a sense of like, and also coming from, an Asian background, you're wanting to achieve and you're wanting to get accolades and you're trying to get validation, and they don't validate you. And it was very confusing being in an American society where a lot of my peers, and particularly my second family, I was seeing that they're getting validated. It was really confusing. And so lately, as I'm transitioning and growing and trying to understand like who I've been and how things have played a part into me, a big part of that is Filipino culture. That's a big reason why I moved to San Diego. And so since I'll be traveling there for the first time in January, I've decided to start doing a little bit of research. And so I started following some Instagram accounts, one in particular called The Filipino Story. And so it's just been really helpful to understand ways of being like Kapwa, and like understanding like just things that I never was ever told or shared any stories about. And so one way that I started learning about my culture was a book recommendation from my partner called Duran Duran, Imelda, Marcos, and Me by Lorena Mapa. And so this book was just like the perfect like bite-size, fun-size Twix bar that I just ate today. And I was learning about pop culture. I was learning about politics. I was learning about religion in the Philippines, all through a comic book. And what stood out to me was the story of the dictatorship of Ferdinand Marcos. And depending on who you are, some may consider him the Trump during that time. And his wife, Imelda Marcos, is equivalent to Melania, right? And so I was curious of 2 things after reading this comic book and trying to piece things together after watching some videos on the Filipino story and reading this book and having conversations with my partner. And I asked myself 2 questions. 1, did my mom move to the States because of the politics of this dictatorship? And 2, learning in the book that Filipino culture is actually a matriarchal society. And what has that experience been like coming from a matriarchal society to a patriarchal society? And so I was like making sense of like, well, no freaking wonder she works as hard as she does, and why she's always tired and exhausted because you're leaving a country and a society that's for you as a woman because of the Virgin Mary, according to this book, the Virgin Mary, and then coming to a society where it's not in your favor. It's like, I can only imagine piecing that together myself. I'm like, oh, no wonder she wasn't like present for me, because she was trying to figure out how to do life in this new country. And so I wanted to ask her, I'm like, hey, did you leave the Philippines because of what was going on? So I called her, and I thought it was going to be a short conversation. And so I was like, hey mom, like, when you left, like, was it because of the dictatorship? Like, what was it for? And she's actually said, no, I used to work for Imelda Marcos. And I was like, wait, what? I was like, oh, that just made me question so many things, because I was just like, did you know like what was going on? Did that matter to you? Anything like that. It's like if my mom said that she worked for Trump, I'd be like, I got questions. What's going on? But that's a whole different conversation. And so I learned later that she was just in the Ministry of Human Settlement. And so even when they were kicked out of the country, she ended up working for Cory Aquino, and who's basically like, in my interpretation, the Michelle Obama. Read the comic book. And so my mom was just doing what she wanted to do, I guess, and ended up in that place, and she didn't really have any ties to who was in leadership at that time. And so that conversation, I thought it was going to be a quick conversation. That turned into a 3-hour conversation and 4 pages worth of notes, front and back, later, and 1 crammed hand. And so after reviewing my notes, I and my mom like sharing so many gaps of the story that I've been trying to put together my whole life, essentially, I realized, and I knew this before, but I like wrote it down in detail. I don't know why my mom just like outpoured all the details, but I was like, I need to write this down. But I realized how many times my parents went their separate ways, had separate marriages, had kids with these separate marriages, had different boyfriends, had different girlfriends. And somehow over the course of like 10 years, they somehow kept finding their way back to each other. And so I asked her, I was like, well, how did I get here? You know? And so she, speaking of menstrual cycles, so bringing it all back around for y'all, speaking of menstrual cycles, after she finally got with my dad, you know, and my dad finally keeping his promise that he's going to bring her back to the States. It's a whole story, okay? I'll probably write a book on it sometime. But she said that she had her menstrual cycle on a rhythm, and she knew exactly when they can have pleasure and when they couldn't, so that she wouldn't get pregnant, you know? And so she hadn't gotten pregnant for 15 years from my last sister. And so one time, my dad had this gig, this job in La Jolla, in San Diego, California. And so so they had sex. And this is key here, because the story is that it felt like an obligation. The story in my head that I interpreted and filled in the gaps was that my mom felt obligated to have sex with my dad. After taking notes last night, it was actually the other way around, that my dad felt obligated to have sex with my mom. And my dad's a decade older, so he's probably like, she could leave me anytime. She's still a hot little toddy, you know what I mean? Like, I need to do what husbands do, I guess. And so they did the thing. And so many months later, you know, my mom was like sure that nothing happened, but she didn't get her menstrual cycle. And so she's like, wait, what is going on? She's like, I can't be pregnant. I've done what I've been doing for the past 15 years. And then the next thing you know, she was too far along. Okay, so then I have to, you know, in terms of storytelling, she was too far along to reverse and decide to abort me. You know, so in that story, again, I'm like, oh, I'm a mistake, right? Like, I'm a mistake and I'm not supposed to be here. And so I popped out March 22nd, 1990 at 4:15 a.m. for those of us who are into human design. And I realized after reviewing my notes when we finally got off the call, in which I'm going to have to call her back to be like, okay, so like what really happened? Not what really happened, but like, okay, so I pop out, you know, like I need to get like what actually the details of that. Because a lot of times she says, one, that my Auntie Gina, which is my dad's oldest sister, kept encouraging my parents to have one more kid. They need to have one kid together. And they were like, heck no, we don't like babies. We don't want no babies. We're too old for babies. So that was encouragement. And then two, my mom said that it was like the easiest birth she ever had. And so I would think amongst all that, I'm just like, okay, like there has to be something else bigger at play here. So after I looked at my notes, I was like, the main thing that percolated for me was that there was so many things that had to add up for me to be here. Like my parents could have just met once and just been long lost lovers, and it was just, you know, hit and quit it and goodbye, you know, but they kept coming back to each other over and over and over again, despite all of the other things that were stacked up against them, you know. And it wasn't even like, oh gosh, we need to get back with each other, like you're the love of my life. Like it just, I don't know what it was. I'm still trying to make sense of it all, to be completely honest with you. But what I got from all of these notes was, at the end of the day, that I'm a miracle. And so I wanted to look up the definition. What is a miracle? An event that appears inexplicable by the laws of nature, and so is held to be supernatural in the origin or an act of God. And so after telling the narrative for so long and trying to make up for it that I was a mistake for my whole life, it wasn't until last night I was taking these notes, and my mom just wanting to share these gaps of her story that I have filled in with my own narrative. I was like, holy moly, I'm a miracle. This is a miracle. Not only is every day a miracle, but I'm a miracle. What? My mom had everything planned out in terms of whether she was gonna, you know, on her cycle or not. Like my dad they had all these marriages. Like, what, how did this happen? It's like, I'm a miracle. Like we are nature's greatest miracles. You know what I mean? Like it's so crazy to me. And so after last night, I was just like, oh my goodness. I was like, I just had this feeling and the continued feeling of rejuvenation. I was just like, wow, I'm not a mistake. I'm so here on purpose. Like, I'm so here on purpose. Like 4 notes later and a cramped hand later, like, I'm so here on purpose. And so today, this morning, and I woke up and being so grateful for another day, knowing that that's a miracle, knowing that it's a part of this greater plan, this greater mission, and I'm just a small part in it. I just woke up. The Spirit woke up in me, was like, it's time to get up. It's time to work on what we got to do, because you're a whole ass miracle. And so I wanted to encourage you to think about your story, why you're here, why you're watching this, that you're a whole ass miracle. Think about it. Think about all of the decisions that had to be made, not only from your parents, but from your grandparents to your great-grandparents, to your great-great-grandparents, to your great-great-great-great-great-grandparents, to our ancestors. Like, if you're watching this right now, you're a whole ass miracle. You, an event that appears inexplicable by the laws of nature and is so held to be supernatural in origin or act of God. So I hope that if you're feeling discouraged, which we have every reason to feel discouraged after this past week, but if you're feeling discouraged, I hope that you know that if you're watching this, not only did you get another day, but for whatever reason why you're watching this right now, and that you have had everything technically stacked up against you, you are a whole ass miracle. And so I just hope that that encourages you, and that if you have another story, if you were filling in the gaps with your imagination of your parents or your family or your guardians that told you otherwise, I encourage you to maybe do a little bit more research, dig in a little. And I hope that you find that despite how they tell you the story of how you got here, you're still here watching this, and you're still a whole ass miracle. And so I just feel astounded and grateful, because like from here on out, like this moment forward, well, technically as of last night and for the past 24 hours, because it's been 24 hours since I talked to my mom, and I realized, like, holy moly, there were so many reasons why I didn't need to be here, but I am here, and so are you. So I encourage you again, like, are there stories and narratives that we keep telling over and over and over again? Every time we meet someone new, we keep telling them some narrative that we've made up in our own imagination of why we're here or why we're not here, whatever the case may be, that needs to be changed. Do you need some evidence of that? And you need to ask your family, like, how did I get here? How did I get here? If you can. And if not, regardless of what the story is, can we change the story? Can we change the narrative? Every time you meet someone new on this thing called the internet, we have an opportunity to tell a new story, a new narrative. So for the past 34 years, or 15, however long of consciousness that I was awake, I told people I was a mistake. I was unplanned. I wasn't supposed to be here. And now after last night, I was like, I was planned. I'm not a mistake. I'm supposed to be here. And so I'm just like, let's freaking go. And so I hope that, again, that you feel encouraged to realize that you are a whole ass miracle, and that you take the time to realize that that's the case, and that not only are you a miracle, that you're here on a mission. The mission doesn't have to be this grandiose thing. The mission can just be a good and loving person. The mission can just be a great auntie or uncle or whatever the case. The mission can be just a great parent. The mission can be a great friend. I don't care. But we are all here to some extent with some mission that's been planted in our heart. And a lot of times it's a creative mission, because Spirit is a creative being. And so I just hope that this encourages you, because it has completely and will completely change the course of how I show up each day and how I continue to move my mission forward. And so I just appreciate y'all for being here and for witnessing this, and just for watching. I know that you could be anywhere else in the world right now, but you're here with me, and I really appreciate it. And so if you end up doing this, I would love for you to DM me and just share your thoughts. Share your current story and how you would want to rewrite that story. I would love to hear more about it. And more than anything, if you did get to this very end of this video, not only do I appreciate your time and attention, but more importantly, get off now. It's time to get off and look up from your phone and continue to be curious. All right, y'all, I appreciate you, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye now.